Yes,
Got a
it's,
good turnout.
well, there are a lot of people here, and that really warms my heart for them all to be coming and to have a reprieve from the rain and the snow. It's a lovely day, and Lynn does such a nice job with the gallery. Thank you, Lynn, so much for the hospitality. Lynn and Russ for having us here, and Lynn for this beautiful gallery and for her wonderful eye with the way she arranges the work. I really appreciate that. And I also want to thank Sarah Sargent for being here. Sarah is responsible for the essay in the book, the catalog, Passages, and talking with her was a real experience because a lot of times I'm not exactly sure what's going on up here, and she somehow distilled and clarified, and it was like looking in a mirror. So thank you very much. Thank you so much. But just more than anything, I thank every one of you for venturing up here, taking your time today and wanting to be here. So thank you so much. It makes me feel great. And Steve, my friend, is also going to be videoing this back here, so thank you all, and thank you, Steve. What I wanted to talk about today, I'm going to talk about why I named the show Passages, my process, some influences on my thinking about art, and then of course we'll talk about the art itself. But the last thing I want this to be is me up here just talking. So I hope this is going to be a conversation, and more than anything, hearing what you have to say, how you respond, is that's the biggest buzz for me in the whole thing, is just what you have to say and how people respond. That's really awesome. Why did I name this show Passages? Well, I named it Passages because passages sort of infers two things. Not only from going one place to another, but also relationships. So it covers, as Lynn says, some work since I've shown last with her, which was in 2012. Wasn't it January 2012? Mm-hmm. So from that departure point. But it also covers what my mind, I think about where was my mind then? What was I thinking? That was my first solo show, and it went well. And after you have your first solo show, it's a little bit daunting to look in the mirror and think, oh, now what? I can't paint another flower because that's just way too predictable, and I won't be. I was real concerned about what everybody was going to think about me, and that's not a good place to paint from because you will have a painter's block, which is what happened to me. And that was not a pleasant thing to go through. However, it's all part of the process, and that's cool. So I'm learning to live with that. But the relationships, when you look at these and you look at the flat picture plane, you'll see the play between one area to another, one color to another, one texture to another, one shape to another. That's passing. But then also the picture itself, and this one specifically is a good example, has this gloss on it. So the way the light moves through this, the light moves through this painting in a much different way than it moves through this painting or this painting. Some you can see the texture with your eye, and that's the way the light plays with that. My process is non-linear. In other words, it's all over the place. I write, I read, I think, I look, I pray, I draw, I paint. Sometimes I just sit and look. And these are all a part of the process. And a lot of times I say it's more like tributaries in this winding river that I may take a path this way through some writing and some thinking, and a drawing may come out of that. Or I may decide that it's time to take an oil class because the acrylics are just frustrating me, and I'll learn something there. Or it may be pulling out some pastels that I have and playing with those and the textures and what happens. So the fertilization from one medium to another really teaches me a lot. And but a lot of times what I'm learning is that the question itself is pretty much the answer. And I'm learning to live in a place that the question is okay. And my process really is a collaboration between the intuition and the discipline. The intuition in, I'm really into the way those trees look out there. What is it? Is it because it records time? Is it because it records today? Is it because it's just this linear structure against something else? So I spend a lot of time in my mind thinking of these things, and that's where I'm having to learn that that's okay. That's all part of my process. I always thought that artists were people that would sit down, have an idea of what they were going to do, very deliberately go about it, and then produce something. But for many, that may be their process. That's not my process. My process really, there's a lot of just following the question, and that's the intuition. And then there, of course, is the discipline, having to know what elements, what am I going to put together? Am I going to use lines here? Am I going to use shapes? Am I going to use colors? Those are the whats. And then the principles, how am I going to put them together? Is it going to be with a lot of variety? Is it going to be with a lot of contrast? Is it going to be, where's my balance? So those are the things discipline-wise that I'm having to think about. But I want to mention also the technical, your material of what you work with. I work in acrylic. And I think sometimes acrylic gets a rap of being, it's one of the newest mediums that is out there. And it's basically, the pigment is floated in this immersion that has plastic in it. It's a polymer immersion. And it said, well, you know, it mimics watercolor and it can mimic oil. But I think those of us that paint in acrylic, paint in it for very specific reasons, and we need to start standing up and saying, but acrylic has so many merits in itself. And some of the merits that I see about acrylic is this right here. I've used lots and lots of glazes on this. Well, the glazing itself is a polymer immersion, and it's basically paint without color in it. So it's a transparent paint that I use. This right here has a fiber paste, and that once again is this porous, rough material that's suspended within the polymer that makes the paint act a different way. So acrylic paint can be glossy, it can be porous, it can be non-porous, and it almost, I was never really good with chemistry in school, but I loved going out and making sandcastles on the beach behind my house. So if you liked making mud pies, it's kind of like you can just get in and play with the acrylics. And there's so much that they can do and say. Investigating that, to me, is it's just the technical diversity, I think, is fascinating. Two influences that have shaped my thinking about art are Madeleine L'Engle and Henri Nouwen. And Madeleine L'Engle is a novelist and a poet, and she's probably best known for a children's book, A Wrinkle in Time. But my favorite book is called Walking on Water, and she talks about what it means to be an artist, to be a creator, and she has sort of come up with the idea that somebody, and I really grappled with this for a long time. I thought, I cannot call myself an artist. That is this lofty, I am not an artist. And I thought, but Madeleine L'Engle says an artist is someone who serves the work, a midwife of sorts, of helping to bring this into being. And I thought, I know a lot about being a mother, and I can do that. I can be an artist if that's what an artist is, because I do feel like I've birthed a lot of babies in this room. And so Madeleine L'Engle also talks about faith, and where faith is that place beyond reason. And for me, because a lot of my creative process is spent in this intuitive not knowing, it's really comforting to know that faith, that there is something on the other side, and it's okay to just float in the place of faith for a while. Henri Nouwen is a Dutch theologian who was a Catholic priest, and he taught at Harvard and Yale Divinities before he went to live in a community called L'Arche. And L'Arche communities began in France and then have moved. You may know more about this than I do, but they in L'Arche, individuals that have physical or mental disabilities live, and they have caregivers that live with them. And so Henri left this life of the academic to become this life thinking that he was going to serve. But what he really learned was that in living with this young man named Adam, that Adam was the one who served and taught him. And so he speaks a lot about hospitality. And his ideas of hospitality are creating that space for another that is not free, that's free from the host imposing and manipulating and feeling, for some reason that you have to conform to something. So to me, these canvases are a place, they're an open space for me. They're a place where I love, and I do this a lot, I love going back and taking part of the whole art history conversation, where I read about other artists and try to understand their process, but yet I understand that I cannot conform and be that person. You have to figure out what that means with your own stroke, with your own gesture, and how you move. And so the canvas is a very open place to think about that. It's also the place where when I'm moving along in my process, and I am determined that it's going to be 3 red flowers on a yellow background, and all of a sudden that splash of blue jumps in, and I'm thinking, oh, either we're going to do what Ellen says we're going to do, or we're going to have to do what the painting says we're going to do. So being open to those things happening and letting that be my lead is very important. So I'm going to talk now about the art, and specifically here, there are 3 styles. That this here is glossy, and I've used, in my acrylics, this is a lot of layers here, and there are a lot of transparent layers in between these. What that does is it draws the light in, and the light bends and bounces. It creates depth. It also intensifies the colors. And I love working with the glosses because they do that, and that's sort of where I was during my last show, and was really working with a lot of the gloss and thinking about the light going through. It also kind of says to me that there are those dark places inside that even the light of the divine can get to, even though we want to hide them and mask them and cover them and insulate ourselves, that the light can still get in there. But I kind of also, several people said to me, do you realize it almost is like a glass-like cover? I want to touch what's inside, what's underneath. I want to get in there. And so I sort of started questioning, well, what would happen if I took the gloss off? Because I've developed a way of working where you paint one layer and you put the gloss on and it isolates everything under there. You can't mess it up. I can put paint on. If I don't like what happens, I can take the alcohol and I can rub it off. And then sometimes when you rub it off with the alcohol, you get these really cool effects. So alcohol, which kind of became a remedial source that I turned to, actually became one of my tools for making the paint. I can't do that if I am not using my layers. So what have I got to do? And I thought, well, it means you've got to think of something else. So I decided, well, let's play with, and these acrylics can dry really quickly sometimes too. So what if I started using the fiber paste? I have used that sometimes in my layers, and it's very textural, it's very porous. What if I just used that and didn't add anything, didn't add the gloss to it? And like I said, it just, you can get in, you can slop it around, and it's so thick. I use a lot of times when I use that, I use a palette knife instead of a brush. So being able to use the palette knife here and just get in and move around, I can let the canvas show through. I see the canvas, I can scrape it away, I can build the layers, but you can feel it and you can touch it. But I've got to be careful. I'm still learning how much I can put on and add, because I still want the light and the colors to keep their intensity. So I'm trying to, that's something that this is, I guess I just started doing this in 2013. So this is relatively new of working with this without the glosses. And the third thing that I decided to do is, what if I just went really pure and just put the paint on with water and didn't add any additives? And I'm learning that I can't go too thinly with acrylic, because then it will not stick to the canvas. It creates a very, it doesn't create a good foundation for later working with, and that's what I've been told. I haven't really investigated to see if that's real true, that it makes sense, something about chemically the way the water gets in with the polymer. Do you know, Russ, if that's true?
It's,
No?
I don't think so.
Really?
But I use a lot of water when I start paintings.
Yeah, well, that's what I always...
It's acrylic and water, yeah, I don't think.
Yeah, and somebody said, you're not supposed to do that. And I thought, oh, I need to discuss this with Russ, or, you know, I'm not creating these things that are not. But once again, there's so much to know about acrylics. So, but these paintings, because I am trying to see how little can I put on these and still have them intense and colorful and see some depth. But yet, if I put too much, I know me, I will overwork, I'll get it dirty looking. And so this is kind of in 2014, late 2013, and in 2014, I've kind of moved to a place that I'm also, but I do it all at the same time. So I'll do this for a while and think, I am so sick and tired of, I can't think of anything new to do, I'm gonna do it differently today. And once again, that's how the play of the different, almost mediums, but different ways of handling acrylic can be energizing and renewing. So, does anybody have any questions?
Are you, excuse me.
Yes,
Are you using golden products?
Golden is what I have primarily used.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started using some Golden Open. And then Russ turned me on to the Atelier. And I think I'm liking the Atelier
Because?
because it seems to stay open and pliable longer. However, I love the manganese blue hue in the Golden Open.
Yeah.
But the Atelier has got a cobalt blue that you can, what is it called, the rheology, how long, you can just ooze that thing if you kind of, because I'll kind of dip in at the end. and I want to get some paints, and I'll think, oh, let's look like I splattered something there. Let's look like I dropped something there. So sometimes there's little drips and drops in my paintings.
So do you paint and then you put the gloss over it? And then put
When I
another
use the
layer?
gloss, I'll paint get to a certain stage, and then put the gloss on.
These are all canvases.
Yes.
They're all linen canvases.
Oh, canvas or linen,
Okay.
cotton or linen.
Okay.
I have a question
Sure.
about the fiber paste.
Uh-huh.
I'm not an acrylic, but I've not done that, I'm only watercolors.
Uh-huh.
How did you find out about fiber, and what is it? Is it really fiber, like cloth?
I
or-
forget exactly
That's-
what is added in there to make it. It's not really fiber. It's more of a synthetic material that they put in there, and I can't think of.
Is it
what
just
it
for
is.
acrylics, or?
You might could add some watercolor into it. It just wouldn't be vibrant.
Is it the pumice?
It's
I love
The
the
pumice
colors.
texture in
now the pumice
is
is
different.
in this painting
Okay.
behind you right here, actually, where Steve is standing.
Uh-huh.
That has a base of pumice, and it has a gold base to it. And I use also iridescent and interference paints. And those are paints that have some kind of, the way the particles are mixed in there, it makes the light bend. You can use them so on the surface, it gives you the same effect of what this light is doing. But if you use it as an underpainting, it will affect what's on top. So therefore, this painting right here, although it looks kind of like a flat painting, there are lots and lots of layers underneath that teal that you're seeing on the outside. And I did use pumice there for that. So, yes, Karen?
The paintings on the back wall here
Uh-huh.
looks like you were just in a completely different mood. It was a season in your time that, okay, I'm going to use more greens and browns and sort of darker hues, if you will. I love them. I mean, I think they're great, but I'm just wondering if you could talk about that there.
Yeah, those back there, I did. I kind of went into and I guess what really precipitated it was in using some of these glosses. If you put a gloss on and then you put paint on it or another gloss too soon, it causes it to crease. And that's supposed to be a bad thing, but I think that is fascinating. Yes, because then you can rub more paint on top of it and it'll go into the crevices. And so it was just kind of from that, I had this really nice base and I thought, what do I do with that? And sap green kind of will move nicely. And I thought, well, I know sap green will move on this. What can I do with this in sap green? And maybe I can tone down whites, because sometimes to me whites can look plasticky when I paint them with acrylics. And so it was sort of in a trying to address that and thinking about what that problem was. I'm trying to think, why did I paint so many of them? They just, well, it went from, and that one there on the back wall, and this one right here, they were painted about the same time. And
It's one you can just barely see it.
yeah, and that one there. And they were just playing, I know what it was. I had a commission several years ago that a friend of mine, wanted to commission a lotus for his wife's yoga studio down in North Carolina. And I had never painted a lotus. And the lotus and the magnolia
Right.
kind of
They
are
look
a
like
little
that.
interchangeable when I paint them. And that's the other thing. These are not botanical rainbows. They are, Ellen gets to play God today and decide that a lotus has pollinated, yes, from magnolia. So they came out of that And they were both received well. And I thought, well, let's paint some more and play with some of these things that happened in those two. They both have homes in North Carolina now. There were two that I painted at that time. So but then the rest of that wall, those were just, again, playing with the techniques of how will the paint move. What if I just drip the paint on this slick surface? One of them back there, as you'll notice, there are two that they are not glossy, but they are using the gloss procedure. It's just at the end they were so glossy you couldn't see what was happening because some of the paints were metallic. And so I put then the fine pumice over them to take the sheen away.
What about the composition? Does that just happen as you're painting, or do you think about?
No, that's where my drawings kind
Okay.
of come in, and I think more about composition in the
Okay.
beginning
Okay,
of
that's what I
painting,
wanted,
and I'll
yeah.
do a thumbnail, and then when I go
Okay.
to put it on the canvas, I mark the center because I will inevitably put something right smack in the center, and all of a sudden it'll be the focal point, and so I'll mark my center and say away from the center, and then kind of plan
Okay.
around.
Well, with your drawings, did you value studies then too, at the same
No,
time?
value is not something that
Okay,
I
you're-
have studied a whole
Okay.
lot. I've just kind of started thinking about value consciously.
I had a couple of questions.
Yes.
One is, do you prefer liquid acrylic over tube?
No
No
preference.
preference.
It
Do you
just
use
depends.
both?
I use them both, and it just depends on what I want it to do. The liquid is good when I'm using the acrylic fiber paste on the paste because you squirt it in, it mixes in very nicely. Liquid is also really nice when I want to just do something really sheer on the top of some of the glossiers.
And the other part of the question is, I'd like you to talk about that painting. It seems very dreamy and loose, and just wondered what you,
Well, as I said,
which part of the sequence, it's not glossy, it's not textured.
no,
Is it one of the
that's
newer
kind of
ones?
in the, I guess, it did precede this one, but as I tend to overwork things, I feel like I get tighter as I overwork. So pulling back, these two paintings on the back wall, the long paintings, I had a commission in New Hampshire for 12 10 by 10s for a wall, and it was sort of, this is what she wanted, she saw one painting, which was a 12 by 12, and said, okay, I want really 12 of those, and I want it to look like So I started thinking of ideas and things that I would do for that painting. So these two paintings came, and after I had painted this hydrangea feeling flower, so often when I started putting it together, I guess it was at the point then that I had worked through a lot of the things that tightened me up. And those two paintings came, and I started feeling a looseness. And so it was from that. Then if I go back to the zinnia or the sunflower shape that I do, how can I keep it really loose? And if I'm going to do it here without the layering, how would I do that? So that's
When you're talking about this texturing, is it acrylic? Do you buy it as acrylic?
texturing.
The whatever the
Paste.
The paste?
Yeah.
Yes, it's a golden product, and it
Okay.
comes, you can get it right at Michael's or Studio Art or,
So you buy it in colors, in the colors?
no, you can, that's where the liquid, the fluid paints,
Okay.
add a dab of color to that.
Oh, okay.
You can
okay.
tint it any way you
Okay.
want. You can put it on without color, or you can color it.
Okay.
Either way.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
Carol has been playing with these. She's got a show right now at Beaux-Arts, and she says it's everything acrylic. So she has done lots of that Cavalier. But you've got at Beaux-Arts your things there, because you. But Cavalier is. Any other questions?
I have just another question, just an idle question about rhythm. Obviously, you feel a rhythm when you do these because it's your signature. Are you conscious of that rhythm as you paint?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes and no.
Uh-huh.
I'm aware after I've painted it that it
So you're seeing it after? Yeah.
when I'm really in painting well.
Right.
I don't-
Exactly, when you're conscious.
It's sort of like my husband walks in and I'll say, "Don't talk to me now," because I go to this place that I can't carry on a conversation. And if I've got to carry on the conversation, then I'm out of that great painting place.
The zone.
So, yeah.
Do you recognize that you have the same rhythm with your feet when you're walking in a place where your mind is also in that unconscious place?
No.
No.
Do you?
Okay. Sometimes.
That's interesting. That's so, your feet have the same rhythm when you're in your
Yeah.
Zen place that?
Yeah. Well, it's the energy
Uh-huh.
that creates what you're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I think the energy that goes into what you're creating and the energy that is such a fascinating subject to me. And it's,
Well, you're touching on it. That's what I feel when I see these.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
And it's there, it's the intuitive, and that's where I'm trying to get more comfortable, as I said. I don't have a degree in painting, and I always loved art, and my father even said, "Why don't you major in art?" And I said, "No," because to me, I knew art was a place that I went, that was my place, and it was safe, and it was for whatever I wanted to do when I was there. I didn't really want to invite anyone else there. Now, I wish I had, but because of that, I kind of have this insecurity that because I don't have these MFA behind my name, it makes that these people have gone to school and they have learned something about the creative process and how to make their paintings. And I'm sitting here fighting in my process, and I'm reading one day and writing the next day and doing absolutely nothing the third day. And that's where I'm learning that that's okay. That's
And it's
my
not
process.
obscuring your natural rhythm, which you have, which when you see a show like this, you recognize your signature.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That's, and
Very nice.
Sarah articulated very well in the very last paragraph of that essay, this feeling that we have, and I thought, yeah, did I say that to Sarah? She heard it. I don't recall saying it that way, but she heard it, so yes, that's very much. But,
Well, it's lovely. It's a lovely show.
well, thank you.
As I've been sitting here and looking at the various pictures and watching the sun as it lands on the pictures, it just pops it out and makes it so alive. In particular, these pictures here, well, here comes the sun. Not that they're not alive to begin with, but when the sun lands on them, that flower just wants to come out and greet you.
And that's
Yeah,
wonderful.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, thank y'all so much. Just
Thank you.
take your time.
Okay, well, I have known Ellen since, gosh, in the 1980s, early when I first came to Charlottesville, I met Ellen, and back then she was going to grad school at the Curry School, so she got her master's there. And well, that was a little bit later after I met her, but she loved writing books for children and illustrating the books. And so I think she really enjoyed the illustrating more than even the writing. And I remember when my kids were born 19 and 20 years ago, she gave me these beautiful paintings with words on them too. They were like talismanic, beautiful paintings that I still treasure, one for each of them. And she had they were watercolors, but she had a real knack. They were just very spontaneous and really beautiful. And then much later, she started experimenting with other mediums, like acrylic. And I put her in a group show at my old space on Water Street, and we sold out. They were beautiful little flower paintings, small scale. 2 years ago, I had a show of hers here at the gallery, which was also wonderful, and it had some abstract paintings. So we wanted to do it again this year, and I was totally blown away when she started bringing the paintings in, because she had more than I've ever seen and larger than I've ever seen. And the textures and the materials, she just has continued to evolve and experiment. Used to do mainly these glazes over the flowers, and they get real shiny. This year, we have 3 years in this one show actually, 2012, 13, and 14. She brought me some paintings the day before the show opened. But she's doing now more with fiber paste and getting these wonderful textures. And she paints the sides of her paintings too, and they become part of the whole composition. And they are very gestural. I love the color, and I love the texture she's getting with the most recent. And some of the 2014 paintings are a lot like this one, which is a little less thick. This has fiber paste in it, this doesn't, but the line is so beautiful in this one, and it's almost really spare. So I admire the way she has evolved and continued experimenting with her materials and creating these beautiful new creations. I'm very proud of this show.
I bought my first Ellen Hathaway artwork probably in 2006 or 2007, and it was also a flower. I'm very much into flowers and colors and things like that, and I had a very specific place in my condominium where I wanted to have that. It was a relatively good size painting of an amaryllis. What I love now is that one is sort of pastel colors, mainly soft colors. What I like now are her use of reds and the depth of the intensity of that color. I really, really enjoy. And then later I bought a second piece which was smaller, has a lot of blue colors, very intense blue colors on it, and they're sort of side by side, the two paintings on either side of a window, and so they really fit well into my condo.
So they hit you on a visceral level, but they also fit in with the design.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. But I love her things again because I love colors and I love flowers. So her style is and I love her as a personality. She's just one of the loveliest people I know, and her husband. They're just fantastic couple, and so I enjoyed knowing her and having gotten to know her over the years.
Yes, I mean, I think her art it's much more than just about the paintings. They're really sort of expressions of human relationships and her own sort of journey, her own emotional and sort of psychological expression. That's very, very common with artists, especially as they continue their careers, that it becomes more of sort of dialogue with the medium and the actual surface of the painting or whatever it is they're working on. I just think it becomes something where they are active within the action of painting or potting or whatever it is, and it becomes almost second nature to them. So it doesn't really, it's the mind to the hand rather than really thinking about it. Well, I mean, I think it's really interesting when you have an experience that I have where I'm I'm not only looking at the work, but I'm talking to the artist, and I'm really trying to delve into where they're coming from. It just gives you such an enhanced impression and sort of the whole backstory of the art, which, you know, I feel very privileged to have that relationship with the artists that I write about.